Have you ever felt like your name was stretched into something it was never meant to be? People saw one moment of your life and decided that was your whole story. They called you lazy when you were only resting. They called you weak when you were actually healing. They called you arrogant when you were just learning to stand tall. And maybe you didn't fight back. You stayed quiet. You let them talk. You let time do the explaining. But deep down, you wondered, will the truth ever catch up with me? If that's you, this message is not by accident. Because today, we're going to talk about what really happens when God decides enough is enough. When He rewrites your name, not with rumors, but with revelation. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear might just shift how you see your own story forever. 1. They misnamed you, but that was never your truth. Have you ever noticed how quickly people put a label on you? It's almost like they don't pause to ask who you are becoming. They just decide based on what they see in a single moment. Maybe someone at work said you were lazy, when in reality, you were just burned out from carrying more than your share. Maybe a family member whispered you were weak, when in truth, you were taking the first fragile steps to heal from something heavy. Or maybe someone called you arrogant, when you were simply learning to hold your head up after years of shrinking yourself. It hurts, doesn't it? Not because the words define you, but because for a while, people believed them. And sometimes, even you started to wonder if maybe they were right. But here's what I need you to hear. Reputation is not identity. Reputation is the story others choose to tell about you. Identity is the story God is still writing within you. And those two are rarely in sync at the same time. Think about it. Some of the greatest names we admire today were once mislabeled. Steve Jobs was called too intense, too controlling, even unfit to lead. Yet, it was precisely that intensity that birthed Apple. Oprah Winfrey was told she was unfit for television. Walt Disney was fired from a newspaper job because they thought he lacked imagination. Imagine if they had let those false names stick. The problem is not that people misname you. The real danger is when you start to defend yourself too quickly, trying to correct every whisper, trying to argue your way into being seen correctly. That's a trap. Because the more you explain, the more power you give to the rumor. And let's be honest, Americans, especially in a culture driven by social media, often feel the pressure to set the record straight. But here's the truth. Silence is strategy. You see, silence gives you space to grow without distraction. It allows you to invest energy into your becoming rather than wasting it on convincing. When you choose not to fight every label, you allow time and God to do the revealing. Maybe you've experienced this firsthand. You were the quiet one in the office, the one who skipped happy hours and stayed focused on your tasks. People said you were cold or unfriendly. What they didn't know was that you were building skills after hours, preparing for a bigger role than they could imagine. Or maybe you're the dreamer in your family, the one who wanted to start a business while everyone else played it safe. They shook their heads, called you unrealistic. But deep down, you knew you were planting seeds they couldn't yet see. Those labels, cold, unfriendly, unrealistic, they were never the truth. They were just snapshots taken too soon. Because identity is not measured in snapshots. It's revealed in seasons. So let me give you a small but powerful lesson here. Don't let someone else's mislabel become your mirror. The names they gave you were not a prophecy. They were a projection. They were reflecting their own limits, not your destiny. Your silence in those moments wasn't weakness. It was wisdom. You knew there was no need to argue. because the real evidence would come later, and it will. In fact, some of you are already starting to see it. The same coworkers who dismissed you are now asking for your advice. The same family who doubted your dream is now quietly watching your progress. That's what happens when truth catches up with you. It always does. But don't miss this. The goal is not to prove them wrong. The goal is to keep becoming who you were always meant to be. Because the more you focus on proving, the less space you have for growing. And when you keep growing, eventually your presence carries a weight no rumor can compete with. So yes, they misnamed you. They mistook your patience for passivity, your healing for weakness, your confidence for arrogance. But none of that was the truth. It never was. And when you stop carrying the burden of defending your name, you give space for God to rewrite it. Which leads us straight into the next part of this journey. What happens when silence turns into revelation? Because there comes a moment when the labels fall away, not because you shouted louder, but because God Himself steps in to reveal who you really are. 2. From silence to revelation. When God writes your name again. What if I told you your reputation is about to catch up with your reality? That everything they whispered in shadows will no longer matter, because truth is always louder than rumors. See, this is where many people get it twisted. They think when God steps in, He gives you back the old reputation you lost. But that's not how He works. God doesn't restore your name to its past version. He rewrites it completely, so it finally matches the identity He's been shaping in you all along. This is not karma. This is not revenge. This is alignment. Alignment means your inner growth finally meets your outer recognition. It means the person you've been becoming in silence is now undeniable in public. Let's pause here and clear up a common misunderstanding. Reputation isn't about looking good in front of people. It isn't about stacking likes on Instagram or posting your success to prove something. True revelation is not about visibility. It's about accuracy. God doesn't care about giving you more fans. He cares about restoring the truth of who you are. Think about an artist who went through a scandal. They could spend millions on PR campaigns, hire agencies, release apology videos, and maybe, for a while, people buy into it. But lasting revelation doesn't come from spin. It comes from transformation. When that artist truly grows, when they've matured, when they stand differently on stage, the audience feels it. They don't even need to explain. The presence says it all. That's exactly what God does in your life. He lets you go through seasons of silence, not to punish you, but to prepare you. And when the time is right, He pulls back the curtain. Suddenly, the same rooms that once ignored you invite you. The same voices that once dismissed you listen with respect. Let me give you some everyday examples, because maybe you've lived through something like this. Perhaps years ago, you were overlooked for a promotion. You watched someone else get the title, while whispers followed you out the door. It stung, but you stayed steady. You built skills quietly. And then, years later, the same company that once passed you over now calls you back with an offer you never expected. That's not coincidence. That's alignment. Or maybe in love. You were once taken for granted. They thought you were replaceable. But you chose healing instead of bitterness. And now, as you stand in a stronger, wiser version of yourself, even those who underestimated you can't help but notice the difference. Here's where many people go wrong. They think revelation has to be loud, that you need to broadcast your glow up, prove every hater wrong, make sure the world knows your name. But that's not how God operates. His revelation is subtle but undeniable. It doesn't scream. It settles. It doesn't beg for attention. It commands respect. So here's the lesson I want you to carry. This is the season where you don't chase recognition anymore. You don't have to knock on every door or post every victory online. Doors will start opening to you, not because you shouted, but because your presence carries a new weight. Opportunities, respect, invitations. They find you because your energy has shifted. And Scripture already told us this: there is nothing hidden that will not be revealed. Luke 8:17. What was once whispered will be exposed. What was once concealed will come to light. So if you've been wondering when your moment comes, hear me clearly. It's not about fighting for it. It's about being aligned for it. And that brings us to where this journey is really heading. Because once revelation begins, once God Himself confirms your name, the story doesn't just stop at being seen. It moves into something far deeper: peace. The kind of peace where you walk into rooms that once triggered fear and feel steady, where judgments bounce off you like they were never meant to stick, where your life stops needing explanation because it has become the evidence. And that is where we're going next. So here's where we land. Your story is not defined by the labels others placed on you. It's not trapped in the whispers of yesterday. Your life is becoming living proof. That silence was never wasted. That alignment always leads to revelation. And that peace is the truest sign of transformation. As you step forward, remember this: you don't need to convince anyone anymore. Your presence will speak. Your life will echo. And what God has revealed, no rumor can erase. If this message has touched something deep in you, let it breathe beyond you. Share it with someone who might need the same reminder. Leave a thought in the comments. I'd love to know how this meets you in your season. And if you'd like to keep walking this journey together, stay connected here. Until next time, keep steady. Your revelation is already unfolding.